4 millennia ago, in the sprawling Mesopotamian city of Ur, a civilization pulsed with life, yet its heart beat to the rhythm of silent, carved stone and the distant, indifferent gaze of celestial bodies. This wasn't just any ancient city. It was the epicenter of a deeply ingrained polytheistic culture, a place where the heavens themselves were seen as a pantheon of powerful, often fickle gods. Here, monumental ziggurats pierced the sky, their towering bricks reaching towards a cosmos believed to be teeming with divine entities. Every sunrise and sunset wasn't merely a natural phenomenon. It was a divine decree, a daily confirmation of the god's dominion. Each twinkling star wasn't just a distant light. It was a celestial entity, a deity to be appeased or feared. The people of Ur lived under the omnipresent shadow of countless deities. They worshipped everything from the majestic moon god Nana, whose radiant presence dominated the night sky, to an endless array of idols crafted from wood and stone. Each of these figures, whether grand or humble, demanded reverence, sacrifice, and unquestioning obedience. Daily life wasn't separate from religion. It was interwoven with it, a constant cycle of rituals, offerings, and prayers directed at these silent, unmoving figures. You can imagine the scene. The smoke of incense curling upwards, the murmur of prayers filling the air, the collective belief that these idols held the keys to prosperity, protection, and the very cycles of life and death.
The air was thick with superstition, tradition, and a profound collective belief in the power of the visible and tangible gods they had created or identified in the cosmos, leaving little to no room for dissent or any alternative thought. To question was to invite disaster, to challenge the very fabric of their existence. Into this world Prophet Ibrahim was born, a seemingly ordinary child destined for an extraordinary path. Yet his earliest years were steeped in the very practices he would later dismantle with such conviction. His father, Azar, wasn't just a worshipper of these idols. He was a master craftsman, a respected artisan whose skilled hands shaped the wood and stone into the very deities his community revered. Young Ibrahim grew up amidst the scent of freshly carved cedar, the smooth coolness of polished stone, and the constant hum of his father's workshop, a place where new gods were born almost daily. He'd watch Azar, his brow furrowed in concentration, meticulously carving the eyes, the mouths, the limbs of these figures. He'd see him painting them with vibrant hues, adding intricate details that, in the eyes of his people, brought them to life. This intimate proximity to the creation of these idols, however, inadvertently sowed the first, quiet seeds of doubt in the sensitive, observant heart of the young boy. A silent, unsettling question began to form amidst the sounds of chisels and the murmur of prayers, a query that would one day shake the foundations of an entire civilization. Even as a child, Ibrahim possessed an innate curiosity and a profound intellect that set him apart. While others accepted the world as it was presented, his mind grappled with deeper questions, observing the vastness of the cosmos with an unblinking gaze that sought more than just beauty. He watched the sun, majestic and powerful, dominate the day, casting long shadows and warming the earth, only to disappear into the horizon each evening, leaving the world in darkness. He marveled at the moon, a radiant guide in the night, its gentle glow illuminating the path, yet it too waxed and waned, eventually vanishing from sight entirely for days. And the stars, countless and twinkling, seemed to follow an immutable, unseen command, appearing and disappearing with the seasons, shifting their positions within the grand celestial tapestry. How could something that appeared and disappeared, that was subject to change and cycles, that was clearly governed by an unseen force, be an unchanging, eternal God? This wasn't mere childish questioning. It was a profound philosophical inquiry, a nascent rebellion against the prevailing wisdom, a deeply personal quest for a truth that transcended the limitations of what he saw and what his people worshipped. His spirit yearned for something more constant, more absolute. This intellectual journey led Ibrahim to a series of logical deductions that were radical for his time, yet utterly compelling to his discerning mind. If the sun, moon, and stars were truly gods, why did they set? Why did they appear and disappear, subject to the whims of time and space? Surely, a true God, the ultimate creator, would be beyond such limitations, beyond the need to rise and set, beyond fading from existence. He sought something that governed these celestial bodies, something that commanded their movements and their cycles, not something governed by them. He reasoned, with a clarity that cut through centuries of tradition, that there must be a singular, all-powerful entity, an unseen hand that orchestrated the cosmic dance, that brought forth the day from night and life from barren earth. His thoughts were a quiet revolution, a solitary pursuit of absolute truth that chipped away at the foundations of his society's beliefs, leading him to the undeniable conclusion that there was only one God, a God who was eternal, all-encompassing, and utterly unique, unlike anything his people had ever conceived or worshipped. A God who didn't need carving, didn't need a ziggurat, didn't need to be seen to be profoundly, undeniably real. This burgeoning conviction ignited an immense internal conflict within Ibrahim, a profound struggle between his deep love for his family and community and the undeniable truth he felt pulsating through his very being. The pressure to conform was immense, an invisible weight pressing down on him from every side. To challenge the gods of was to challenge the very fabric of society, to risk ostracization, even death. You can imagine the fear, the isolation of holding such a radical belief in a world so utterly devoted to its traditions. Yet the truth he had uncovered was too powerful, too compelling to ignore. It was a lonely journey, a solitary burden of knowledge in a world unwilling to see beyond its traditions. His heart ached with the weight of this responsibility. But with each passing day, his convictions solidified, transforming from a mere question into an unshakable certainty. He knew, with an absolute clarity that defied all external pressures, that he could no longer remain silent. The time for quiet contemplation was over. The time for action, however daunting, was fast approaching. But how do you confront an entire civilization, a beloved father, and the very gods they believe control their destiny, when you stand utterly alone? The answer, for Ibrahim, wasn't a sudden, grand declaration to the masses. It began with the quiet courage of a son approaching his father, Azar. You see, the profound discovery that had awakened Ibrahim also brought with it an urgent, almost unbearable need to share his truth. And who better to start with than the person closest to his heart? His initial approach wasn't confrontational. It was gentle, respectful, filled with the deep love and reverence a son naturally holds for his father, despite the profound ideological chasm that had opened between them. He didn't accuse or condemn. Instead, he queried, he reasoned, he appealed to the very intelligence and common sense he knew his father possessed. "Father," he would ask, his voice earnest, his gaze unwavering, "why do you worship that which can neither hear nor see, nor avail you anything? What benefit do these stone figures bring you? Can they protect you from harm? Can they provide sustenance when you are hungry? Can they even respond to your most fervent prayers?" He pointed out the sheer futility of praying to deaf, blind idols, the glaring illogicality of attributing divine power to mere creations of human hands, objects that couldn't even move without human intervention. He tried to explain the concept of the one God, the true creator, the orchestrator of the cosmos, the provider of sustenance, life, and guidance. Gently, patiently, he urged his father to abandon the path of idolatry and embrace this singular, undeniable truth. But Azar, steeped in generations of tradition, and perhaps more importantly, invested in his livelihood as an idol carver, met these heartfelt pleas not with curiosity, but with resistance. His initial dismissiveness soon curdled into irritation, then a chilling anger. "Do you reject my gods, Ibrahim?" he'd thunder, his eyes narrowing. "Are you turning away from what our forefathers worshipped? If you don't cease this talk, I will surely stone you. Leave me before I do you harm." It was a stark, terrifying threat, a stark warning of the danger Ibrahim now faced, not from strangers, but from his own blood. Undeterred by his father's harsh rejection and the chilling words, Ibrahim knew he couldn't remain silent. His message was too vital, too urgent. He extended his dawah, his call to truth, to the wider community. His voice, initially a quiet ripple in a vast sea of unquestioning faith, steadily grew in clarity and boldness. He didn't preach fire and brimstone. That wasn't his way. Instead, he approached the elders, the leaders, the common folk in the bustling marketplace, wherever he could find an ear willing to listen.
He engaged them in intellectual discourse, challenging their deeply held beliefs with irrefutable logic and observations drawn from the very world around them, the world they saw every day but chose not to truly comprehend. "Do you really believe these statues hear your prayers? Do they respond?" he'd ask, his gaze sweeping across their faces, searching for a crack in their conviction. But the answers were always the same: a shrug, a defensive retort, a quick change of subject. It was clear direct confrontation wasn't breaking through the thick walls of their inherited beliefs. A different, more dramatic approach was needed. An act so audacious, so undeniable, it would force them to confront the stark reality of their idolatry. And then, the city of Ur was buzzing with anticipation for the annual festival, a grand occasion when the entire community, from the humblest citizen to the most revered priest, would leave the bustling city to participate in joyous celebrations outside its walls. This was a day of feasting, music, and offerings, a time when the people would journey to a sacred grove, leaving behind their homes, their shops, and most importantly, their gods. For Ibrahim, this wasn't just a festival, it was an opportunity. A window of time, perhaps only a few hours, when the magnificent temple, the heart of their polytheistic worship, would stand empty and unguarded. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the ancient streets, the last stragglers departed, their laughter echoing back to the silent city. Ibrahim watched them go, a profound sense of purpose settling in his heart. This was his moment. Under the cloak of twilight, Ibrahim made his way towards the great temple. The air was thick with the scent of incense and stale offerings, a testament to the countless rituals performed within its walls. He slipped inside, the heavy doors groaning shut behind him, plunging him into an eerie silence broken only by the rustle of his own clothes. Rows upon rows of idols stood before him, carved from wood, stone, and precious metals. Some were towering figures, their faces stern and imposing. Others were smaller, intricately detailed, adorned with jewels and rich fabrics. Each one represented a god or goddess, revered by the people of Ur for various aspects of life: fertility, war, harvest, the sky itself. Ibrahim walked among them,
his heart heavy with grief for the people who bowed down to these lifeless forms, yet firm in his resolve. He carried an axe, its cold weight a stark contrast to the warmth of his conviction. He began his work methodically, moving from one idol to the next. With each swing of the axe, a piece of wood splintered, a stone crumbled, a metal limb bent and shattered. He wasn't fueled by anger, but by a desperate need to show them the truth. He wanted them to see the fragility, the helplessness of these false deities they worshipped. He wanted them to understand that these idols couldn't protect themselves, let alone protect their devotees. Crack, thud. The sounds reverberated through the vast temple, each blow a declaration against falsehood. He broke their arms, their legs, their heads, reducing them to mere fragments of their former revered selves. But he wasn't indiscriminate. He left one idol intact, the largest one, a massive, imposing figure that dominated the central altar. And then, with a deliberate, calculated move, he placed the axe in its hand, leaving it as the sole, silent witness to the destruction. His message was clear, a riddle etched in stone and shattered wood, waiting to be deciphered by a bewildered populace. He then left the temple as quietly as he had entered, melting back into the shadows of the deserted city, leaving behind a scene that would shake the foundations of Ur's faith. The next morning, as the first rays of dawn touched the city walls, the people began to return from their festival. Their joyful chatter filled the streets, their hearts light after a night of celebration. But as they approached the temple, a hush fell over the crowd. Something was wrong. The grand doors, usually open wide, were ajar, and an unsettling silence emanated from within. A few brave souls pushed forward, peering into the sacred space, and then a collective gasp, a scream. Chaos erupted. Panic spread like wildfire as the news traveled through the throng. Their gods, their beloved idols, lay in ruins, shattered, desecrated. The temple, once a symbol of their power and faith, was now a scene of utter devastation. Confusion quickly gave way to outrage. Who could have done such a thing? Who would dare commit such an abominable act against their most sacred beliefs? The priests, their faces contorted with horror and fury, immediately launched an investigation. They scoured the temple, their eyes darting from one broken statue to another, searching for clues. It didn't take them long to notice the lone, massive idol still standing, the axe clutched firmly in its stony hand. A murmur spread through the crowd. This was no ordinary act of vandalism. This was a statement. And then, one name surfaced, whispered at first, then shouted with growing conviction. Ibrahim. He was the one who had openly challenged their gods, who had mocked their traditions, who had questioned their very way of life. He was the only one who would dare. It wasn't long before soldiers were dispatched, and Ibrahim was swiftly apprehended, brought before the enraged crowd and the city's powerful ruler, King Nimrod. The scene in the royal court was tense, heavy with anticipation. Nimrod, a man known for his tyranny and unyielding authority, sat upon his throne, his eyes burning with a cold fury. Around him, the city's elders and priests stood, their faces a mixture of shock and righteous indignation. Ibrahim stood before them, alone but unafraid, his composure a stark contrast to the volatile emotions swirling around him. "O Ibrahim," Nimrod boomed, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Was it you who did this to our gods?" The question hung in the air, weighted with the unspoken threat of a terrible punishment. The crowd leaned forward, eager for his confession, or perhaps his denial. But Ibrahim didn't deny it. He didn't confess in the way they expected. Instead, he met Nimrod's gaze with unwavering clarity, a subtle smile playing on his lips. "No," Ibrahim replied, his voice calm and firm, cutting through the tension.
It was the biggest one among them that did it. Ask them if they can speak. He gestured towards the temple, implicitly referring to the massive idol he had left standing, the axe still in its hand. A ripple of confusion passed through the assembly. Ask them? How could a stone statue speak? For a moment, a profound silence descended, as the people grappled with the absurdity of his statement, and then, slowly, the truth began to dawn on some of them. Ibrahim wasn't just deflecting blame. He was exposing the fundamental flaw in their entire belief system. He was forcing them to confront the very impotence of the idols they worshipped. If these statues couldn't even defend themselves, if they couldn't even speak to identify their attacker, then how could they be considered gods worthy of worship? A flicker of doubt, a momentary crack in their collective delusion, appeared. Some among them whispered, "Indeed, you know that these idols don't speak." They knew it. Deep down, they always knew. But that flicker of truth was quickly extinguished by the overwhelming force of pride and stubbornness. They couldn't admit their folly, not after generations of devotion, not in front of their king. Their anger flared, fueled by wounded ego and the humiliation of being outsmarted. Nimrod, his face contorted with rage at Ibrahim's audacity and the public exposure of his people's irrationality, slammed his fist on the armrest of his throne. "Burn him!" he roared, his voice shaking the very foundations of the court. "Build a pyre for him, a great fire, an example for all who dare defy our gods and our traditions." The verdict was swift, brutal, and absolute. There would be no trial, no appeal, just the horrifying certainty of a fiery death. Throughout the city of the command spread like a chilling wind. "Burn Ibrahim!" The people, still reeling from the desecration of their temple, rallied behind their king's decree, their anger turning to a bloodthirsty fervor. They gathered wood from every corner of the city, dry branches, old furniture, anything that would burn. They dug a massive pit in the public square, piling the kindling high, creating a colossal pyre that loomed over the city like a monstrous threat. It was the largest fire ever seen in meant to be a spectacle, a terrifying warning to anyone who would challenge the established order. The flames leapt towards the sky, their heat radiating outwards, making the air shimmer. The roar of the fire was deafening, a symphony of destruction. Ibrahim was brought forth, his hands bound, his face serene. He walked towards the inferno, not with fear but with a quiet dignity, his gaze fixed on a truth far beyond the raging flames. He knew he was not alone. As the soldiers prepared to cast him into the heart of the blaze, a profound stillness settled over Ibrahim. He uttered words of remembrance, placing his complete trust in the one God, Allah. With a mighty heave, they hurled him into the roaring inferno. The crowd gasped, some turning away, unable to watch the dreadful scene. The flames engulfed him, a consuming wall of fire. But then, something miraculous happened. The fire, which had been so fierce, so destructive, suddenly changed. The heat vanished. The flames, though still present, became cool and calm. Allah had commanded, "O fire, be coolness and safety upon Ibrahim." And so it was. The fire, by divine decree, transformed from an instrument of death into a haven of peace. Ibrahim stood unharmed, untouched, a figure of serene defiance amidst the swirling, harmless embers. The people watched in stunned silence, their jaws agape, their minds struggling to comprehend what their eyes were witnessing. The roaring inferno had become a gentle breeze around him. They saw him, not consumed, but standing as if in a garden, untouched by even a wisp of smoke. The fear in their hearts turned to utter bewilderment, then to a dawning, terrifying realization. This wasn't magic. This was something far greater, far beyond their understanding. This was a sign. A clear, undeniable miracle from the God Ibrahim spoke of, the God who commanded the elements themselves. The fire had failed, Their gods had failed. And in that moment, the true power of unwavering faith against the mightiest of human tyrants and the fiercest of earthly challenges was made breathtakingly, eternally clear.